This is day 26, and today we're talking about data quality. I'm going to show you how to audit your data. And don't worry, it's not as intimidating as it sounds. The thing is, you can have the best dashboard in the world, right? You can have all the beautiful charts, the slick filters, and even a color theme that anyone would dream of having. But if the data isn't accurate and it contains errors, that's going to create so many problems you wish you didn't have. Let's put this into perspective. So imagine you board a plane with your family and the moment you get on, you're greeted with smiles from the cabin crew and they guide you to your seats. But just before takeoff, the pilot comes onto the speaker and then he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your pilot speaking." Unfortunately, we're not sure if we have enough fuel to get to our destination. And plus, we haven't done our safety checks today. However, the plane looks great and we have wonderful snacks to keep you occupied. So, fingers crossed, God willing, we hope we get to our destination. Imagine you hear that, right? And the same cabin crew that greeted you with smiles onto the plane, their composure suddenly changes because they're no longer smiling and they're just as nervous as other passengers on that same plane. So, my question is, would you want to stay on that flight? Honestly speaking, you're with your family, and the pilot's basically telling you he doesn't know if you're going to get to your destination because the team haven't performed safety checks, they haven't got enough fuel, they're not sure if the engine's working properly. Would you want to stay on that flight? You probably would not want to stay on that flight. And why? Because lives are at stake and trust has been broken at the worst time possible. And even that, just hearing that announcement, now your entire flight experience has been interrupted because somewhere down the line, someone was not able to confirm that it was safe to fly in the first place. And the same rules apply to data. If you can't confirm that your data is accurate, your data is complete, it's reliable, then the insights you present are just guesses. And it doesn't matter how pretty your dashboard is. If the data behind it is wrong, then the outcomes can be dangerous or just plain deceitful. You can't build trust with broken data. So the second people spot something's wrong with your reports, it can mean trust is gone. It's easier to lose trust than to gain it. And then you'll start hearing things like, "Are you sure these numbers are correct? Why doesn't this match the numbers we've got?" Now, I need to make an important distinction here. There's a difference between data quality and data validation. We covered data validation on day 13. So, what is data validation? Data validation stops bad data from entering your system or spreadsheet. So, you may be asking, but what if there's bad data already in the system? Can't you still add data validation? And the answer is yes. So, you can still add data validation if there's already bad data in the system. So, if you want to prevent more incorrect data from entering your spreadsheet, then you can certainly add data validation. That's what it's for. Now, data quality is checking whether the data already in the system is good enough to use for analysis. So data validation deals with data that's not in the system yet. And data quality deals with data already in the system. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a few examples to illustrate how data quality checks actually work. And guys, it's one of the most important things you can do for your data. If you want to build trust with your users, data quality checks are compulsory. You have to do them. We're going to take a look at a few real examples of data issues and how to find them with data quality checks. In each of these examples, by the way, we're not actually cleaning the data. So what we're doing is we're auditing the data. That means our only job is just to check how good or bad the data is. And then we're going to report what we find back to the right people so that they can take the right steps in making sure that the data gets better. Okay, so let's begin. We have a list of employees and we want to review their contracts with us. However, some of them are missing critical details we need for this, like, as you can see right here, start dates and job titles. If we don't have this, then this will delay the contracts. But at the same time, we don't have enough context to fill this in ourselves. We're going to check how many cells are missing information in general. And then we're going to report back to HR so that they can fill this in for us. I have a cell that contains the number of missing cells. We're going to fill this in and we're going to use a formula, a very simple formula to check how many missing cells are in our data set. So I'm going to use the count blank function. And then I'm going to highlight this entire data set. All I'm going to do is hit enter. And then if I scroll all the way back up, There we have it. So we have 11 empty cells. So what the count blank function does is it'll count how many empty cells exist in our data set. If it returns anything more than 0, then we have blank cells that we need to fill in. So as you can see, we have 11. So if you want to look manually, you can see that there's an empty cell there, there's an empty cell there, you can see a few there, etc. So now what we can do is we can use this information to escalate these empty rows to HR so that they can follow up on it. And that's a data quality check. It's simple, but it's effective. So let's move on to our second data set. So what we have here are a bunch of support tickets. So this was sent to us by the support team. And the manager was told that this gets updated every single time a ticket is completed. However, they're not sure how that's being tracked. So because of that, they're worried that there may be duplicates in the data set. So we've been asked to audit the spreadsheet, and we're basically just a pair of second eyes before it gets to leadership. And if there are, then that's a billing risk. So that could mean that the same issue is being billed or counted twice, and we may be overstating how many cases are actually being handled. That's obviously not good. So let's help them find out. The first thing we need to do is flag all the duplicates. So some of them may be visibly obvious, some of them may not be. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new column. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a new column in, and then I'm going to type in duplicates check. Then I'm going to use the if function. Okay, so let me just add the if function in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the COUNTIF function inside the if function. I'm going to select all the ticket IDs as the first argument, and then I'm going to check the very first tickets as the second argument. And then I'm just going to close the bracket, and then I'm just going to say greater than 1. Okay, so what I'm saying is if, let me just get my mouse. So if this ticket So if this selected ticket is appearing more than once inside this range, then this is what I want you to return. Duplicates. Okay, so if the ticket ID in this row is appearing more than once inside that ticket ID column, then I want you to return duplicates. Otherwise, just return OK. In other words, it's fine. And then as you can see, it's copied down the formula all the way to the bottom. So we now know which tickets have been duplicated. And if I want to check myself, then I can just, let's say, I'm going to copy this ticket number or ticket ID and then just paste it here. Click OK. And as you can see, this is truly a duplicated ticket. Okay, let me clear the filter. What else is a duplicate? Let's scroll down. Let's pick 1005. Let's find out. And that's also a duplicate. So it looks like our formula is working. Let me even check. Let's see if this is a duplicate. This is saying it's not, but let's just confirm that. And there you go. So our formula does work. So I'm just going to clear the filter. I want to now check how many duplicates exist. We've successfully highlighted each of the duplicate tickets. But what I want to do now is I need to count how many times we flagged duplicates in here. So I'm going to click into this cell. This is G2. And then I'm going to type COUNTIF. Then the first argument will be this entire column. And then the second argument will be my criteria or my condition. So COUNTIF, you see the word duplicates. I want you to count how many duplicates appear inside this column. So how many duplicates do we have? So we have 34. So we have 34 duplicates, okay? Right now, we have a clear view of which tickets have been repeated in our data set. And on top of that, we know how many. So we can confidently go back to the support team manager and say, we found 34 duplicates in your data set. And these are the rows we found too. So what we can do as well is we can actually filter this. just to the duplicated records, and we can tell him, these are the rows we found. So would you like us to look deeper into why that's happening? And that's the audit. That's the audit right there. So we've done the audit and we're also offering to help them investigate further. And we know that it could be a copy and paste issue, or people are just logging the same tickets twice. But either way, it's now on record and the team can take action and figure out a way to clean up the process moving forward. Now, let's move on to another example. So we're going to look at outliers now. Now, this is an expense report and this is from the finance team. So every single month, the finance team release their expenses report to leadership. And this simply shows how much they've spent on things they believe is good for the company, good for their teams, etc. So leadership wants us to find out if there are any unusual transactions that need to be reviewed before it gets approved. So most entries usually fall between a few hundred or few $1,000s. But there are instances where there are unusual transactions like this one, which is likely a coffee machine, we've been told. So that could be a genuine entry, or it could be a data entry mistake. In other words, somebody's just typed in too many zeros. What we need to do is we need to highlight the numbers that just look weird so that we can raise them for review. We need to actually set a basic threshold. Let's use a simple rule. Any amount that's over $10,000, let's mark it as unusual. And then I'm going to register that threshold into a new column. So I'm just going to name our new column outlier check. So we've said any transaction that's over $10,000, we're going to mark as unusual. So we're going to use our if function again. And then I'm going to say if C2 or the expense is greater than 10,000, then I want you to mark this as unusual. Otherwise, simply return OK. And then I'll hit enter. So we have a lot of OK transactions. We have just about 4 unusual transactions, at least. Now, what we need to do is we need to find out how many unusual transactions we found. Okay, so we're going to mark how many unusual entries we found. And the COUNTIF function is what we're going to use again. So the first argument in the COUNTIF function is going to be all the values in our new column. Let me just quickly, I am just going to freeze the pane. So when I'm scrolling down, I can see my columns. Awesome. Okay, so let's do that again. So I'm going to add the COUNTIF function. Then I'm going to include the range as my first argument. And then I want you to count all the unusual entries. Then I hit enter. And there we have it. So we have 4 unusual entries inside our data. What we've done is we've highlighted all the outliers in our data set. And we're not saying that the outliers are wrong, okay? We're not accusing anybody of anything. We're not saying that they're wrong. We're just simply noting unusual behavior. That's what we're doing here. There may be legitimate reasons behind some of these purchases, but we just need to justify what ROI it brings. That's all. Otherwise, we're going to create a culture where anybody can just buy whatever they want and use fancy words to defend their purchases. We can go back to the finance lead and say, we found 4 unusual transactions that fall outside of our normal spending habits. They may be genuine, but we do recommend double checking them before you sign it off. That's a simple and transparent way you can flag risk, and that's without jumping to any conclusions. Now let's move on to our final data set. Now what we have here is a data set that's given to us by our marketing team. This is what they've collected from different campaigns. They want to segment them by country so that they can assign them to the right teams across different regions. However, in the country field, we're seeing things like incorrect spellings of certain countries. We're seeing inconsistent formatting. So as you can see, USA is all in letters, but USA here contains full stops in between. So there are, and look at that. Someone's actually put Mars in the country field. Yeah, someone's actually put Mars in the country field. So what they've asked us to do is to flag any entries that don't match the list of valid countries they actually operate in. So these are the valid countries. These are the countries they operate in. So we need to simply just flag all the unusual countries in this list. So let's create another column, our data check column. Let's call it validity check. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the if function. And then inside the if function, I'm going to add the COUNTIF function. And then our range will be the valid countries. So this is going to be our reference list. And then I'm going to select the active country. So the country in the row we're currently in. And then I'm going to close that with a bracket. And then I'll just type in greater than 0. What I'm basically trying to say is if the country we've selected is in our list of valid countries, then return OK. Otherwise, return invalid. So if you don't see it, then return invalid. Okay, so we can now see all the invalid entries in our data set. We can see the countries that need fixing. So remember, we are not actually fixing the issues ourselves. We're just highlighting them. So now let's move on to our main exercise. This is the returned and damaged goods data set. We've been given this by the finance team and we've been asked to audit this before the finance director reviews it. Here's the situation. The customer service team logs every return manually into this spreadsheet. What they're supposed to track is what products were returned, why it was returned, and how much they were refunded. So what the finance team want to do is they want to summarize all of this data so that they can find out what the most common reasons items were returned and flag anything that looks off. However, this sheet is not actually in a format that they want it in. And we need to help them spot all of the data issues and then let the team know as soon as possible so that they can report back in the next board meeting. So the first thing we need to do is flag the missing return reasons or product codes. But as I was exploring this data set, I actually noticed there were bigger issues. So there are also missing customer names and refund amounts. So it's not just limited to these two columns, even though that's what finance told us. There are actually issues with the customer name and refund amount columns too. We need to actually highlight if each row has at least one blank cell. That's what we need to do. The first thing we're going to do is create a column and we're going to name this missing data check. We are going to type in our formula. So we're going to use the if function. And then I'm going to type in the or function. So we're going to check if there are any empty cells in the current row we're in. So I'm going to check if there's an empty cell here, or here, or here, or here, which is why we're using the or function. And what I'm also going to do, guys, is I'm going to use the is blank function. So is blank is going to check whether the cell that I've selected is actually blank or not. If it's blank, then it will return true. If it's not blank, then it will return false. So I'm going to start with the customer name and then just close that. And then I'm going to use the next is blank function. And then I'm going to select product code. I close that. And then I check whether this one is blank. So the return reason cell. So let me just add is blank. Let's do that again. Then close that. And then I do is blank again. And then select refund amount. And then I close that. And then I'm now going to close the or function with another bracket. And then I'm going to hit comma. So what we're telling this function so far is if this cell is blank or this cell is blank or this cell is blank or this cell is blank, then this is what I want you to return. Or return missing. And if nothing's missing, then simply just tell me okay. So according to this, one of these cells has missing data. I can see straight away it's the product code. Okay, so let me move on to the next one. According to this one, none of my cells have missing values. Okay, and this one here, all of these ones are populated. According to this one, this has a missing cell. So I can see there's blank data in the product code. If I just keep on scrolling, it looks like the function is working. So there's missing data there, there's missing data there. Okay, that's good. So we can confirm that the formula we created actually works. So this is going to give a team a snapshot of which rows are incomplete. And we don't have to guess anymore because we can clearly see it for ourselves. And if you want, you can filter the data to only the missing records. Awesome. So let me just clear the filter so we can move on to our next issue. We need to now flag the return IDs that are duplicated. So the finance team had concerns on whether the return IDs here have any duplicates in them. We're going to now create a new column. We're going to name this one duplicate checks or duplicate check. We're going to use the if function, and then inside the if function, we're going to use COUNTIF. And then the range we want this to check is going to be the return IDs column. So we want all the values inside the return ID column. We're going to select that. And then we want it to check the very first ticket because we're inside the very first row. I'll close that. So if that's greater than 1. So in other words, if you see this ticket more than once inside this range, then this is what I want you to return. Return duplicates. Otherwise, return OK. So these are so you can see right there, this has been repeated more than once. So someone's logged this more than once. And that's not good because each return ID should be unique. There are into more cells than it should, but that would require an investigation. Most of these are actually unique. So it just seems to be the very first record or the very first ticket that has been duplicated. But at least we know how many times the same ID or the same return ID appears in the data set. So that's good. The final thing we need to do is we need to now flag any outliers inside this data set. Okay, so one thing I did notice is that the refund amounts column has a lot of zeros in it. And that's a bit odd because that makes me question if these entries are correct. If the refund amounts are 0, why are these recorded in the first place? If you're refunding money to somebody, you can't transfer $0 into their account. So are these typos? Are these also system errors? So let's flag them anyways, and then we can investigate properly after this. So I'm going to create an outlier check column. This is going to be a simple formula. I'll call my if function, and then I'm just going to select the refund amounts inside the current row that I'm in. So I'm going to say if E2 is equal to 0, then I want you to mark this as outlier. Otherwise, mark this as okay. Now, how many outliers do we have? If I was to just filter this to the outliers, let's just count that. Or if you want, you can use your COUNTIF function and then select this, the entire range, and then I'm going to type outlier. So we have 97 outliers. That's something we have to look into. I think what we should do is we should actually build a whole data quality summary. So instead of having this number standalone like that, let's summarize all the issues we found into one clear table. Okay. And then on top of that, we can actually build visuals from it. So let's build 2 visuals. The first visual we can create is a bar chart to show how many issues we found for each type. And then we can create a pie chart that shows which issues were the most important ones. So we'll highlight which issue is the most important one inside the pie chart, yeah? Or how many duplicates or missing data. We don't want them to go through that struggle. So I think it'll be best for us to create an entire sheet dedicated to summarizing all of the information we found. I'm going to create another sheet. Let's name this data quality summary. Now I'm going to type in check. I'm going to call that check. And then let's create a column that counts the issues. So we're going to call this issue count. So let's now list all the different types of issues we want to aggregate. So I'm going to say number of missing cells. Call it missing cells because we don't want leadership going through the struggle of having to filter the data, do a count if just to count how many outliers are there. And the second one, let's call it duplicate count. I think we should call this number of missing info. If I can, yeah, we'll just call it that. And then the other one's going to be, I believe it's outliers. Okay, so we'll say unusual refunded amounts. Okay, then write total for this one. So we can count the sum of all the issues we found. Okay, so let's use our COUNTIF function again. And then if I just go back into there, so now I'm going to select this range, and then I'm going to type missing as a second argument. So we're going to count how many times the word missing appears inside the missing data check column we've created. And that is 63 times. Now, the next thing we need to do is count how many times duplicate appears in our data set. So I'm just going to go to the duplicate check column and then select this range. And then I'll type in duplicates as the criteria, hit enter, and that's 5 times. The final one is going to be the unusual refunded amounts. So let's select the ranges from there. Now I'm going to type in outlier. And there we go. And then the total, I'm just going to hit Alt and equals, hit enter, and there we have it. So now I've created a simple table that's able to summarize all of the data issues we found in our data set. We want to format the table. So let's make this visually clean and easy to read. I'm going to select my entire data set and then hit Control T so that I format this into a table, and then make sure my table has headers is selected. Click OK. I'm going to change the table style to okay, let's pick this. We need to build a clustered bar chart. The reason why we want it clustered is it's so that we can organize this into a hierarchy from the highest number of issues to the lowest number of issues. It'll be easier to see that visually. So I'm going to select these 3 rows. I'm not selecting the totals because that's going to be irrelevant in our visual. So I'm going to select these 3 and then I go to insert, the insert tab, and then I'm going to click on insert column or bar chart. And then I scroll to the clustered bar chart. Right, so I'm just going to drag this, let's say here, and then I'm going to sort this from smallest to largest. And then I'm going to rename the chart to, just name that to, what are the issues with this data set? And then I'm going to delete grid lines. I'm going to get rid of the x-axis, and then I'm going to add data labels. So under the chart design tab, go to add chart elements, and then click on data label, data labels. And then you can click on how many times each of these issues appear in our data sets. Let's say outside end. And then let's change the color of the bars because we want it to be consistent with this table. You can right click and then click on fill right there. And then I'm simply going to select, we can select this one. So we can quickly see which issues we have. And we can also quickly see a lot of unusual refunded amounts. And there's also quite a bit of missing information inside our data set. But we don't have many duplicates, so we can't complain too much about that. But we clearly need to sort out this data set. Now, what we want to do is we want to create a pie chart. And that's going to show which issue appears the most so that we can tackle that first. Now, of course, we can see it through here, but let me just also show you how to create the pie chart. So I'm going to select our data set again. I'm going to select the first 3 records and ignore the total. And then click on insert and then click on insert pie chart. And then I'm going to click on this 2D chart. I can just drag that there. And then I'm going to rename this. What's the most in, let's say, common? Just move that out. So what's the most common issue with the data? So this is just another way of looking at this. If I just select the pie chart, and then if I right click that, and then I also want to give this a pink fill. Let's go for the lightest. And then for the one that's appearing the most amount of times, I want to put emphasis on that. So I'm going to color this with a darker shade of purple. So let's go with, okay, we can go with this one. So if I look away and then look at this dashboard, this is where my eye is attracted to. So my eyes are actually drawn towards this slice here, which is the effect that we want. So I'm going to delete the legend. And then our slice becomes bigger, which is good. And then let's also add data labels. So I'm going to right click this, click on add data labels. And as you can see right there, I think what I'd want is, let me just go on, I'll go on this one. And I would like that in the outside end. So let me just right click on one of the data labels. And then I'm going to click on format data labels. Let me select percentage. Let's see what that shows. Okay, so I'm going to deselect value because the clustered bar chart already shows the values. So I want to put emphasis on how much of the issues are attributed to this issue or that issue in terms of percentage. So select that. Then let's select category names. Yeah, let's go with category name. And then I'm just going to drag this out a bit so that it doesn't clash with the title. And then let me just drag that a bit. Let's see how that appears. Okay. And there's also lines that are drawing them to their corresponding slices. I'm going to drag the slice out a bit just to emphasize on that a bit more. Okay, that's looking good. Let's remove the grid lines. So click on view, the view tab, and then I'm just going to deselect the grid lines. And then I'm going to deselect the formula bar too. Let's even round up with, let me just call this data quality summary. And then if I just want to, let's say, let's see what that looks like. And then I am going to expand the text. We can let's give it a dark grayish or silver-like background. Yeah, I'll take that. There we go. We have our data quality summary dashboard. And that's pretty much it, guys. So if you did follow me in building this dashboard, then massive thumbs up to you. There is one simple lesson here, and that's to use data quality checks to spot any problems in your data. What you need to remember is there is a difference between data validation and data quality. Sometimes we do use it interchangeably in data, but in truth, if you really want to talk semantics, there is actually a distinction between the two. So you need to remember that data validation stops any bad data from entering your spreadsheets and your databases, so whether that's corrupt data, incorrect data, it stops that from entering your system. And data quality checks, it's all about scanning your data to see how high quality it is. And if there are any problems, you need to address it. But this is one of the most important steps because data isn't always going to be perfect. And you don't want a situation where bad data is sneaking into your reports. So you want to catch them as early as possible if you want your users to be more confident in the data that comes from you. So do not skip this step. If you do want to practice data quality checks more, check out the description of this video for a link to a workbook that I've created. But until then, stay blessed. See you soon.